Hi everybody, thank you very much. I'm Orlando Ruiz Jr. and welcome to this classic movie review. I've already reviewed the very first James Bond film, Dr. No, so this is my follow-up to that, the second James Bond film to ever come out, From Russia with Love from 1963. Like Dr. No, this was also directed by Terrance Young. And once again, Sean Connery as 007. And once again, Sean Connery completely owns the role and kicks ass in, the action department as the, babe magnet and all that. And, great villains in this one. There's a really good story. And for me, this is in contention to be one of the best Bond movies of all time, in my opinion. To me, this ranks up there with all the best ones. And so, when I think of like the best James Bond movies, From Russia with Love always pops into my head. This has more of a spy espionage thriller vibe. At the very start of the movie, right after the iconic Bond being seen through the gun barrel trademark introduction, we see something that we don't usually see when it comes to the pre-title sequence, where usually we see Bond on some kind of mission that is detached from the rest of the story and the rest of the movie. And usually the beginnings of these movies, or many of them, when they were first coming out, they were like little mini movies in and of themselves, where you had Bond on some little adventure, and then we got the title sequence, and then the movie would pretty much start. But this kind of has a different kind of beginning where you think you're watching something and then it turns out to be something kind of different, which is pretty cool when you stop and analyze it after watching it, because this came out in 63 and already they were doing some pretty cool things as far as manipulating the audience and subverting expectations. And it's really, really cool when you watch the film and you see it kind of play out, and then we go into the title sequence. This movie also marks the very first appearance of a very important and beloved character to this series, the character of Q, who would go on in this series for decades, playing opposite many different actors who would fill in the shoes of James Bond. And the actor that plays Q in this movie would go on to play this part for 18 films. And so Desmond Llewellyn, who plays Q in this movie, who is basically the weapons guy who makes all the gadgets for Bond that Bond uses from one venture to another, from one movie to another. Desmond Llewellyn was able to play Q throughout the 60s and 70s into the 80s and 90s. And so his Q is retired later in the 90s, but this actor is so perfect in this part, and doesn't really matter what Bond he's in the scene with. I'm always looking forward to the scenes with Desmond Llewellyn because he's so good as Q. Anytime when Bond was in a scene with Q, you knew it was going to be a highlight of any Bond film, because the little verbal jousting, the little insults that they trade going back and forth is always entertaining. And Q is able to kind of keep up with Bond, which makes him really fun to watch because they both have the same kind of sense of humor where they're just kind of being sarcastic with each other and throwing little jabs and insults, but still kind of respecting each other and remaining friends. It's a really cool dynamic, and it's something that I look forward to whenever I watch any of these movies. And in this film, we get a great scene with Q where he introduces a little gadget for Bond to use on his mission, which involves a suitcase with little trinkets inside. At a certain point in this movie, Bond does use the suitcase to help himself out of a jam, but for the most part, these early movies weren't the gadget fest that they would become later on in the series. This was very much more of a bare bones kind of movie, so the suitcase is pretty basic. It has a couple of surprises in it, but it's not too high tech. It's actually pretty low tech. The basic plot of this movie is basically the British government wants to get their hands on a decoding machine that was developed by the Russians that Spectre wants to get their hands on. And so it's basically a race to who's going to get this decoding machine first. Is it going to be Bond or Red Grant, played by Robert Shaw, who is excellent in the part of Red Grant, who is basically like the main muscle and evil henchman in this movie. And he has a very cool look in this movie. He looks very, very in shape and doesn't sound anything like he does when he's in Jaws or in The Sting. But Robert Shaw is excellent as this very, kind of quiet but still sinister looking villain who doesn't say much. But when his scene does come towards the third act of the film, when he has a big scene with Bond, he gets to, say plenty. And there's a really cool interaction between the two of them that kind of escalates to this big fight. It's very, very cool. Happens on a train. Every Bond movie has a Bond girl, and in this movie we have the beautiful Romanova, played by actress Lottie Lenya, who is very, very good in the part. And it's the kind of character where, at the beginning of the film, she's recruited by Spectre, by the enemy, and so she's supposed to kind of keep tabs on Bond and give him misinformation. But throughout the film, the more time she spends with Bond, the more we see her kind of falling for him a bit. And so we're not quite sure whether she's a good guy or a bad guy throughout the movie. So it's kind of a hard character to nail down, but the actress does a very good job in the part. Though I do enjoy the action scenes in these movies, I very much also appreciate whenever these movies come up with a good story and strong characters. And to me, the action scenes in any movie don't really matter unless the plot works. And in this movie, we have a very interesting plot because of the situation with Romanova and Bond. Since she's hired by Spectre to basically shadow him throughout the movie, we basically have this cat and mouse situation where she's playing him and he knows it, but he's playing her as well because of the fact that he knows it and the fact that he knows that she knows more than she's letting on. The character of Romanova is nowhere near as progressive as Vesperlin, since that was 2006. This is 1963, but it's still pretty impressive to see them weave this male female dynamic and kind of incorporate a little bit of romance in there and still keep it maintained as this oppositions thing where they're still kind of enemies because he has this mission he needs to accomplish, even if he has to smack her, which at one point he does, and it's a moment that might be uncomfortable if you're somebody that doesn't like to watch that kind of thing. But as a viewer, you watch this and you're thinking, well, he's an agent, she's kind of an agent, even though she's, kind of a newbie at it. In no way am I saying it's okay to smack a woman. That is not what I'm saying at all. But if I'm watching a movie, and remember, it's just a movie, and it's the 60s, and Bond is trying to get information out of a potential villain who just happens to be a female, alright, do what you gotta do. Besides the exciting and fun fight scene of Bond and the character of Red Grant on the Orient Express, we also have this really cool chase where Bond is on foot being chased by a helicopter, which seems very much like it was inspired by North by Northwest from Alfred Hitchcock, from that airplane scene with Cary Grant. And there's also a very cool moment where there's a boat chase with Bond being chased by several boats with Romanova. And there's another cool moment where they're at a mosque and Bond is following somebody, shadowing somebody, and has the tables turned on him. Little cool moment there. There's another awesome scene at a gypsy camp where Bond is with an ally and they get attacked by some bad guys, and there's this big elaborate shootout and everything. And this movie is filled with little moments that'll surprise any action fan. This being Sean Connery's second time playing the part of James Bond, whenever I watch this film, it looks to me like he feels a lot more at ease in the role and a lot more comfortable playing the part. And because of that, it makes for a lot more of a convincing, authentic Bond performance, in my opinion. Whenever he's in a dangerous situation and he fights his way out of it, you just believe it because he's just naturally this aggressive looking guy with a very strong presence, and whenever he kicks ass on screen, you just don't question it. It looks seamless, he makes it look easy, and he's just awesome in the part. Whenever he does deliver dialogue, it's with tremendous confidence and style. And even though many people have played this part after him, I don't think anybody has ever played the part like him, which is what makes his Bond very unique and very fun to watch. He was, after all, the original, the one that kind of created the prototype for other people to follow in his stead. And so it's always great to watch classic Bond, and it's always great to watch Connery just do his thing. I easily give From Russia with Love 4 stars. To me, it's not just one of the best spy movies ever made, not just one of the best Bond movies ever made. It's one of the best movies to come out of the 1960s, in my opinion. So, in my opinion, it's one of the best films ever made. This is a well-crafted thriller from director Terrance Young, who is very much a student of Hitchcock, and you can tell when you watch his work. If you watch something like Wait Until Dark, he very much is inspired by the way Hitchcock ratchets up the tension, and he uses some of that technique in his early Bond films. And it shows when you watch this movie. There's lots of suspense, not just action. And, it's more cerebral than your average modern day action film because it is a plot driven movie, not just action driven. But there are some nice moments in there where you will say, hey, for 1963, that's some pretty good action. And so I do highly recommend this movie. This is a movie that you can find on streaming. I've seen streaming services that are showing many Bond films. Some of them have all the Bond films. I don't know which ones right now, but Reason for that is when I watch one of these movies, I don't go to these streaming services. I go right to my collection because I got them all. And this is my copy of From Russia with Love on Blu-ray. As you can see, that is Bond there, Sean Connery, with his Walther PPK, and with his nice little suit. Thank you all very much for watching this classic movie review. I very much appreciate you watching. If you're a returning viewer, thank you. If you're a new viewer, thank you very much. And if you're into this kind of thing, if you're into classic movies, hit that bell and subscribe, and you will get notifications on more classic movie reviews. And if you want to comment, if you want to like, if you want to share, I appreciate it. And don't forget to look out for the next one. Thank you all. Peace out.